we're ready to begin. How did that go? Okay. So you know how to do frame of choice. So you start with some challenging situation, and you may want to identify, what state that puts me in, and what meanings do I give to that, and what's the default frames that I have now, and how has that influenced my sense of self or power or others or time or world, and as you identify that, then you can say, what would you prefer to have? What meanings would you like to give? There'd be empowering meanings that would put you into a different place. So power of frame of choice process. Questions, comments, how to go in terms of facilitating it or experiencing it?
I started with something really global, like time-enhanced perception, which to me seemed like, God loves you. But I wanted to work with it because it had a lot of meaning to me, so I put it out anyway. And I worked with Apollona, and she just followed the lines exactly. And so we took that to a work situation I have. I've got a tile roof that the paint is peeling on, and it's just a gruesome situation. And that was what I didn't like. And we put those two together, and now I can just go out there with enhanced time and handle that. It's not going to be a problem.
Okay.
But it just startled me that it would go together. It was kind of the fact that the process would take these two just totally unrelated situations and make something substantial.
Okay.
Out of them like this.
Okay. Well, that is the wild and the wonderful thing of the mixture of one state to another, and then some of the things that emerges. Sometimes the psychologics of it surprise us. Startled. Okay. Any other questions on that? Well, in terms of meaning making and the structure of meaning making, on page 47, I want to add a couple models, a couple sets of distinctions that I think will be useful. I know that a number of you know about the cognitive distortions that comes from RET, Rational Emotive Therapy. And so on page 47, and you can see the references there where we get these, here's a list of cognitive distortions, thinking patterns that disempower. And so as you go down that list, those of you who know the meta model in NLP, many of these are very similar. Overgeneralizing, jumping to conclusions on little evidence, little facts, all or nothing thinking, black and white polarized type of thinking that maps the world in terms of it's this or it's that. There's only two choices and two value choices. Labeling is a way of thinking and a thinking pattern that when I just call something a name and then dismiss it because, she's just a woman. That's labeling. Or whatever we do. Sometimes we use words to dismiss and to not deal with whatever it is. So we just use labels, and it's a form of name calling, really. Blaming is an accusatory thinking pattern that transfers blame and responsibility for a problem. So the blaming thinking pattern. Mind reading. Prophesying the future is mind reading about what's going to happen in the future. Emotionalizing, taking counsel of one's emotions as if an information source that's always real and true. Personalizing. Awfulizing and terribilizing. This is another form of labeling. It's awful, it's terrible. And Albert Ellis, when he works with this model, and a lot of it came from him, he'll say, "Yeah, I know you don't like it, but what's awful?" And I say, "Well, it just makes me feel miserable. It's awful. I know it's awful, but what's awful about it?" And he'll just drive and drive and drive, because really the word awful and terrible are non-referencing words. What are you actually referring to?
Full of all.
Yeah, the original word "all full" was very different, and how we mean it, we just mean I don't like it. And so as a thinking pattern, sometimes, once again, it's that overgeneralization that just leads to a lot of fluffiness and non-specificity in the mind. Shoulding is a demandingness. I should, or you should, or he must. And yesterday we talked about shoulding all over ourselves and masturbating and using that. Filtering out the positive or the negative. Once again, canting or impossibility thinking. Discounting or minimizing oneself or one's abilities. And so these are thinking patterns that disempower. You can think about them, and I think about them as these are additional meta-programs. Because they're additional filters, perceptual filters, especially the discounting one. So as a meta-program, do things count for you, or do things not count? And if you think of those as the perceptual glasses that you wear, how do you respond to things? And so catching these filters, and then on the next page, the counterbalance is to think contextually. In what context, or in what place or part, and indexing. Both and thinking. A lot of things are both and. It's not that I'm selfish or unselfish. It's that in some areas I'm selfish, in some areas I'm unselfish. It's both and. And so with most things. Reality testing thinking, well, let's test the reality. How realistic is that? Does that work? Is that pragmatic? What results will that lead to? Denominalizing thinking, that is, let's take it out of this abstract term and turn it back into a verb. What specifically are you believing? Instead of values, what are you treating as important? How are you treating it as important? Important to what extent or what degree? And so you can see all these thinking patterns. How I like using these, especially as in a coaching kind of a relationship, is sometimes somebody will be talking about a difficulty or problem, and so as they talk about that difficulty, what's getting them stuck, or they can't get on, or something that's just not working very well, putting them into an unresourceful state, I'll say, let's stop right now. You've told me your story, and it sounds like it's just not a pleasant place to be and something you really want to change. Yeah. Let's look at this list. As you look at the list and you step back, even from the way you think about that problem, how are you doing any of these? Are any of these involved in your thinking? Are you awfulizing? Are you shoulding? Are you musting? Are you personalizing? Are you... And instead of me reflecting, that sounds like, discounting, that sounds like, I invite them to try that on first. And it's just amazing how most people will say, well, I do that, and I do that, and I do this. And once again, it's just matrix detection. Inviting someone to become aware of, maybe the problem isn't the problem. Maybe the problem is how I'm filtering and processing it, and the thinking that I'm doing about some event. Maybe the event doesn't need changing. Maybe my thinking pattern needs changing. And so I like using it as a matrix detection mechanism and as a matrix resolution, because if somebody says, well, I just don't know how to think, it's either this or that, how else would you think? Then we can flip over and say, well, what if we did some both and thinking? And how would that fit in? So then we'll have a conversation about trying that on with whatever. So these cognitive distortions and these cognitive corrections is just a model of really thinking patterns or ways that we create meaning from it.
I've noticed there's a similarity between the distortion pattern, page 113, and the empowerment patterns. Are they numerically complementing each other? Is that what I'm getting out of this?
113?
If you take on page 48, the empowering patterns, they seem to be numerically be counter to the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what's on page 47 and 48, you first got the cognitive distortions, and then you've got the corrections. So in contrast to overgeneralizing, instead of overgeneralizing, we're going to contextualize. Instead of either or thinking, we're going to do both and thinking. So yeah, they're correspondent back and forth. So this is one way to map, and if you map this way, it'll create distortions in the mapping. It'll create, for the most part, disempowerment. And when you remap it this way, you'll map with much more precision, specificity, clearness, and it'll just help you do better, accurate mapping. And so if sometimes the map is the problem, if the frame is the problem, and if this is one way we create meaning through the ways we think, our thinking pattern. Most of these on page 47, the cognitive distortions, are childish ways of thinking. So developmentally, we all came through this way of thinking. Magical thinking, personalizing, awfulizing. This is the way a child thinks. And so typically, as we grow up and as we develop a richer, more expansive way of thinking. You can also think of this, if you've had any classes in critical thinking, this is the problem, the lack of critical thinking, and this is really critical thinking skills. And of course, critical thinking skill does not mean you're criticizing, it just means that you're able to make discernments and discriminations and more precision in your thinking. And so we can have a conversation now around this. Rita?
Have you had experience in this distortion that it takes a lot longer to get at this kind of thing? Or are they these things you think you're doing? And if they can see that, because I think that the pattern is so neat that sometimes it just takes a while to say, maybe I am doing that. Because you might say, okay, I'm doing it here, but am I doing it in other realms? Or
Every time I've taken this and just put it right in front of someone will start pointing to them. I've just never found any difficulty in that, especially if I set up a frame. I want you to tell me your story now, and as you tell your story, if a part of your mind can just listen to yourself telling what's your problem, what's unresourceful, where you get stuck, because in just a moment I'm going to let you step back and look at the structure of it, and it just stands out. And if it doesn't stand out, then I can just do a mirroring. You know, when you said this and this, that sounds to me like you were just discounting, and it wasn't counting for you. Does that fit or not? Yeah, that fits. And so just mirroring back.
the funny in coaching, a lot of times, if you talk to the person long enough, you will see patterns. Just because they said something in the first call doesn't mean that they really have this pattern in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is it possible to raise a child in a manner of empowering thinking rather than distortions, or is it inevitable?
It's inevitable
That we have to go through this.
Piaget was really the first person who looked at the developmental stages, and when a child is 3 to 5 to 7, I can't remember exactly, if you have 2 glasses of water and they're the same, and one is tall and one is fat, every child will say the tall one has more water in it. And you can pour the same water into the fat and pour it back and say which has more water, the tall. It's just part of cognitive development. And so cognitively, we go through steps and stages, kind of like constancy representation being one of the first ones, and then some other ones. And it's interesting. Piaget and other people in developmental psychology has even had videotapes of a child at 5 saying so, and they will play that tape back when they're 12. In puberty, we have some brain chemistry released, and it activates and grows new neurons in our brain, and new parts of the brain are actually developed during our teenage years, which is why we have that spurred into abstract thinking. We can actually move beyond concrete thinking and pre-formal to actually formal thinking. And the kids will see themselves at 5, and they'll just swear that they never would have done that. And even when they see it, they just can't believe. And so we have this post-forgetting. All of us have that post-forgetting. And we forget about how we did magical thinking and pretend thinking. But it's just the developmental stages we go through. So the brain is really not developed. It actually takes 15 years for the brain to fully develop. And so there are those stages. And so every child will personalize and see the world in terms of them. We call it egocentric thinking. They cannot imagine stepping into second position, imagining the world from someone else's position. And so it's called egocentric, and it doesn't mean selfish or anything. It just means that they see the world from out of their own eyes. And it takes them a while to learn those those other developmental skills in their thinking. And that's why yesterday, the day before, when I was talking about a child out of sight, out of mind, you'll even see a child playing hide and seek, and they'll play hide and seek this way. You know, because if I can't see me, if I can't see, then you can't see. And it's really, you know, it's a fun part of raising a little one, and it makes sense to them.
Sorry, just an extension of that. Is it possible then to impose less of your matrix on them, or to program them?
Yeah, if only we could figure that out.
Yeah.
Because every time we open our mouth, and probably the best thing is really guarding our state, so that we don't do parenting things when we're angry, upset, frustrated, and not in a good place. I mean, that would just solve so many problems if we stop taking it out and displacing our emotion. You know, if we could just do that, that would just solve so much. But every time we open our mouth, you know, beliefs and understandings and assumptions and awareness of it is helpful.
But it's not just opening our mouths, it's our body language, it's semantics of body language. Deaf children can still be programmed with those things.
Yeah. So it's,
when I did my original NLP certification, the instructor recommended when parenting to think of what beliefs you'd want your children to grow up with that would be empowering, and then think of what experiences that you could help them to have. Formulate those beliefs.
So they can create those beliefs.
So they could create them, and also think about or make a list of what experiences would you not want them to have that was a counter to that. And that's been valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at what point would they understand the difference between rational thinking and irrational thinking? Is that going to happen at 10, 12?
Well, generally we make that distinction between irrational and rational. That's the distinction in the literature that is called preformal and formal. Concrete thinking and then preformal, and then really the abstract thinking of the formal thinking. And so it's around there. It's around 10, 12, something like that.
What about magical and creative?
Well, I would distinguish those two. Magical thinking generally means, and it's kind of superstitious thinking. Superstition means, the definition of it means that I can control the outside world, I can control the outside universe by having my magical words, my magical rituals, my magical, somehow, and it could be through prayer, it could be through, something I'm going to do, some kind of a process. I'm going to control the rain, I'm going to control other people, and so we see baseball players doing magical thinking. And sometimes, they have to go through the little ritual because that was the lucky day that everything just came to, now I have to keep doing this. Or wearing the same underwear, or the socks, or that cap. And so, and almost anything that is repetitive, like bowling, and suddenly you have 2 strikes in a row, we all get superstitious. Because we look for correlations. What made it happen? And if it was the socks we were wearing, if it was, we started out this way, so now every time we start bowling, we, and what Skinner showed is that you can teach pigeons to be superstitious. So he would behaviorally condition certain pigeons to do different dances around to get their food, because we connect things. It's like the little boy in the earthquake. We connect things, and so magical thinking is there, and even in our adult life, we're not too far from jumping into different kinds of magical thinking, superstitious thinking. And underneath most of that, there's some kind of a structure, there's some kind of a process.
Does that serve any useful thing? I mean,
What I think is useful is that what people end up what they're actually doing is just an elaborate form of anchoring. They're doing an elaborate form of anchoring. So if this puts me into the right state, this puts me in the right state.
So if the baseball player Westy Chicken, which Wade Boggs did before every game, if he by mistake thought it was Friday and ate fish, and he goes into a slump, is that going to keep him in a slump maybe? Where he goes, I shouldn't have eaten the fish.
Yeah. So if he believes,
Yeah.
and so building up a whole matrix around that and believing that, and then of course, then it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. So he gets, the longer any of us live with any belief, we have more and more evidence, more and more evidence. So, so this is cognitive distortions, and because in the way we make meaning, one of the ways we do is with the way we're thinking. And I would really recommend maybe even pulling these pages out, making copies of them, keeping them around until you have the ability to detect different kinds of thinking patterns that are just distortive in its very nature. Let's see. There's a pattern there about detecting the thinking patterns. Identify a problem state that you've experienced. What happened? Describe it. How was it a problem to you? Why was it a problem to you? Step back and listen. Check for the cognitive distortions. And then validate and confirm the cognitive distortion. Reflect it back. It sounds to me like the way that you're thinking about this involves awfulizing. Does it seem accurate as you step back from it and examine it? How would you characterize this pattern of thinking? Being able to detect patterns is what that's leading to. Invite the person then to step back and to use one of the cognitive corrections. Number 5 there is challenge and dispute that distortion. So that may be meta-modeling it, asking a lot of questions about it, and then replacing it with one of the empowering thinking patterns. So there's a process that you can use with regard to thinking patterns. Because thinking patterns in NLP are called meta-programs, I've put the 51 meta-programs that we have in the book, Figuring Out People, on the next 2 pages. And obviously, this is lots and lots of information. And it's there just to give you an idea of meta-programs. Meta-programs are perceptual filters. They are meta-states that have been solidified. So if you think about how we create our meta-programs, imagine a little boy growing up in a house, and he grows up in the house, and his dad is always saying, you know, you need to pay attention to the details. If you pay attention to details, the devil's in the details. God's in the details, but whatever. So his consciousness, his mind is directed to details. And if he does that again and again and again and again, after a while he brings this way of thinking in, and because he's detailing, now he's actually metastating himself, he's detailing himself, and so he's bringing detailing to all of his thinking. And after a while, this detailing then becomes, as it were, his perceptual filter. He looks out in the world for details. Or, if it was the opposite, take care of the dollars, the pennies will take care of themselves. Instead of take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. He might have brought global or generality to his thinking, and so now we would say that he has a meta-program or a thinking style of doing global rather than details. Abstractness more than details. And so this began as a state, and it ends up as a meta-program. So we call meta-programs solidified meta-states. So we learn meta-programs. Meta-programs, for the most part, are learned perceptual ways of functioning. And because meta-programs, for the most part, are on a continuum. In this case, it's between specificity, details, and global, or the gestalt or the general, is between that. We can even identify how global are you, to global to what level, or how specific, and how much flexibility of consciousness do you have. So that we call a driver metaprogram, somebody has a global metaprogram that drives them. It's like it is so pervasive, they see everything in terms of the global, the big picture, or it drives just in all contexts. Or someone who has lots of flexibility, they may be able to move back and forth between them, and in some contexts they're global, some contexts they're very specific, and would have that flexibility back and forth. And that's what is the most desirable, to have that flexibility of consciousness to choose in what context to put on whatever filters that we want to put on for usefulness.
I have a friend, he's so global that he can't hold a job because he can't do details. He's got 5 degrees, keeps going to school. I discuss NLP with him. He's even got an MIS degree, forced himself down. He's doing accounting now. But every time he's in a job interview, he's always telling management if they only did it this way, the company would make more money. He doesn't know how to enter in at that level. I really feel sorry for him.
Yeah. So if these are learned processes, then let's take the global person. What creates that drivenness is, what if the person has some either prohibitions or commands about this? What if the dad punishes the child when they get so detailed and brings pain to detailing, so that detailing becomes attached and connected to something distressful, painful, unpleasant? So even thinking about going down, I don't want to do that. Or what if they went to school and detailing, every time they tried to detail, they get it wrong, they miss this, they get a lower grade, and so they just didn't want to do that. They'd rather live at the other level. What if we brought beliefs about, it just goes better if you can see the forest rather than the trees. And you brought another frame, I'm that kind of person. I'm a global person. Or brought a decision. I'm going to do it this way. This is the way to do it. And so we can then build a whole matrix around a meta-program, a thinking style, to where we don't have permission to do the opposite. So if I was working with a person like that, one of the first things I would do is go inside and notice what happens when you say, I give myself permission to really detail this down and have a lot of fun detailing. And notice if it settles well or if there's all kinds of objections in the back of the mind that doesn't allow me to go there. So this is true on all these meta-programs, and you can see whether it's global or specific, matching or mismatching, whether it's your representational system, just etc. Do you have permission to go to the opposite side and to try that way on? And so if a meta-program is a perceptual style, and a perceptual style that I learn and that I can solidify, one of the things I would recommend is take every meta-program and develop the flexibility going back and forth, the permission going back and forth, because then you'll have so much flexibility. You'll have so much option, so much choice about things, and then your way of perceiving and the way you make meaning, because we make meaning through these filters, will be much more under your control and management than otherwise. So with changing meta-programs may be changing some of the frames, the belief frames, the value frames, the decision frames. Obviously, whatever meta-program that we take on, we value it. How many are global here? How many know that you're pretty abstract and you're pretty global? Now, is it also true that you really value that? That you think that's pretty important? Well, that supports that. My guess is if you're really global and it's really strong as a driver, you probably don't even value detailing. Is that true? Now, if you do value detailing, do you value detailing in all contexts and places, or are there specific areas that it's really important to detail? So some areas. So you can go to those areas and detail. It's like you have permission for that. And so when you find an area that you don't have much permission, that may be a place just to open that up if that would be useful, if that would be important there. Mismatching and matching is when I look out at the world, am I sorting for what's similar to what I already know, or what's different? Am I looking for sameness or difference? Am I matching or mismatching? And how many people match that your basic way of, when you listen to me, you're always comparing in the back of your mind, how does this fit with what I already know? That you're matching. You're looking for sameness. How many would be mismatching? So that when you listen to me, what's going on is, how does this not fit? How's this different? What do I disagree with? I mean, it's perfect. It's okay. I'll still certify you. Because if that's how your brain works, that's how your brain works. That's where it goes. I mismatch. Now, would you know that? Okay, how would you know that?
Here's NLP, and look what you've done.
Okay.
Sort of mismatch the field of NLP in a sense.
Would you know that from the way I present myself in front here? Because any time anybody says something, I'm looking for how that fits and I can use it.
Yeah.
So I'm matching here, but that is not my natural style.
Aren't you also, you're so into distinctions, all these distinctions.
That's mismatching.
When you do distinctions,
That's mismatching.
For example, I have great problems with the money here because it's all green.
Okay. All the same.
I have great problems. I want it all to be in different colours. I want the 20s to be pink, the 10s to be yellow. I want all
I'll take the 20s from you.
I want it to be mismatched because I have great. I can hand over $10 bill for something that's $1.
Yeah.
I'll trade you.
Here's another great example of that little culture. Every time I get all the colored money, I feel like I'm playing with Monopoly. Like it's worthless. Oh yeah, take the pink one. 50. So matching and mismatching and where our brains go. So if you match, if you mismatch, then the next question is, do you have flexibility to shift back and forth? Because if it drives, if you're a mismatcher, you'll tend to be a polarizer so that you'll even mismatch your own self. So that one problem some people have of getting themselves to do things is they say, I'm going to do this tomorrow. When tomorrow gets here and they're going to do it, well, why do I have to? You know, they mismatch. You know, I'm not going to take orders from anybody, especially me. And so a mismatch. And so if you're working with a mismatcher, how do you work with somebody? Because everything you say, they're going to see how it's different.
Like police, accountants, CIA people, they're always looking for differences.
Always looking for differences.
Salespeople need to match.
And so if you have flexibility, then you can play with that, and it's not going to stop you. And so awareness is the first thing, and just reflecting back, how are you filtering this? Because that's going to create certain kinds of meanings, and it facilitates different kinds of jobs, different kinds of activities that we can do or can't do. And so flexibility is the key here. And on the next page, I have a pattern here, changing meta programs. Because if you have a driver meta program and it's stopping you from doing certain things and experiencing certain things and it's sabotaging you in a certain way, having the ability to change that meta program is going to be really, really key. And so obviously identify and check the ecology of the meta program filter, when, where, how to use this meta program that doesn't serve you. So mismatching, if you're a mismatcher and you're doing that in a relationship, the other person can just feel so unappreciated and disvalidated, because every time you open your mouth, you're pointing out what's different and what doesn't fit, and you're doing a lot of yes buts. So in relationship, that is not a place to use that one. It's a great place if you're doing quality control and if you're inventing something new. So inventors and geniuses, mismatching, you know, is the meta program we need to have. So describe the preferred meta program filter. If you're going to change it to another one in that context, what would you prefer to do? What would serve you better? And then trying it out. Now, we can imaginatively adopt this new meta program, pretend to use it in sorting, filtering, attending. Notice how it feels, seems and feels and works in the context where you believe it would work better. Even if it does feel a little weird, actually it's going to feel really weird most of the time. Because it's going to feel like not you. It's going to feel like, I've just stepped out of my world of familiarity. I don't know this. This feels really, really strange. So that people who are really matchers, now matchers are excellent people for relationships and connection and selling and customer service matching. And when you step into mismatching, you may feel like you're being mean. You may feel like you're being unkind. And so it may feel really, really strange when you're doing that. So that weirdness, if you just accept it and that unfamiliarity at looking at the world with that particular perceptual filter, and just notice that and give it a chance. Give yourself a chance to go there and try that on. It's like putting on new glasses, and you'll see the world in a different way. So trying it on, and consciously trying it on, I would recommend. You might model it. Who do you know who uses this meta program and does so in an efficient, effective, resourceful way? If so, then explore with that person his or her experience until you can fully step into the way they do that. When you can, then step into second position so that you can see the world out of that person's meta program eyes, hearing what that person hears and talking the way they talk to themselves, and then noticing what is that like. So you can model it from someone. You could run a systems check on this meta program. Go meta to an even higher level and consider what this meta program will do for you in terms of your perceiving, value, and believing. What kind of person will it make on you? What effect will it have in your life? One of the first meta programs I ever changed for myself was the in time, out of time. In time, through time. When I took my NLP training, I was very through time. I was not in time. I was outside of it, and I could sequence it. I could realize I didn't need a watch. Most through time people don't. They already know what time it is. In time people, they get lost in time. They're in that primary state of time. Through time or out of time is really a meta state, and you have awareness of time. And so we were doing a process, and I decided I was going to switch mine around for a day. And so we did a process where we would go in and just try something on. And so I stepped into the in time, and I took that timeline that I had and brought it right into my body and stepped in there and tried that on. And as I did, I decided to lock it in. I just imagined that this frame locked in, and I could hear the locks all click, and I decided I'm just going to give myself permission to play with this. So I went out and ran. We were in San Diego, and every lunch I would go run, so I went out to run my 4 miles that day. And so I ran, and I didn't know what was happening, but because I was in time, and I didn't have a sense of time, and because of that, I ran. After a while, I started getting tired, and I said, well, I guess it's about time to go in. And I looked at my watch, and it was 2 hours later. So I had to run 15 miles. And I was late. and so I decided I'm not going to live in end time. But that end time is that perception of I just don't notice time. I'm in the eternal now. And some people, that's their meta program. You're married to one.
Focusing on writing or something like that. Would that be something you would want to be in time?
Oh, definitely. So a genius state is going to be in time. Now, we'll set this afternoon, we're going to run the genius pattern, and we're going to set some frames so that you have some cues as to when to come out. So when I'm in my genius writing state, I come out every 15 minutes. And I have some other cues for things that I will give myself permission to be interrupted by. I've missed 3, up till 2 weeks ago, I was telling everybody I missed 2 airplane flights, and a couple of weeks ago I missed another one because I was writing. Last call for flight 104. That's the airplane. So I had to get the next flight. So coming out in that particular meta program. So noticing what frames is holding a meta program that may be a driver meta program that you want more flexibility with. Giving yourself permission to install it for a period of time. Do you have permission to shift to this meta program filter? What happens when you give yourself that permission? Any objections, future pacing it, and so back and forth. So changing these meta program filters, because it'll really change the way you're making meaning in any given thing. For those of you brand new to meta programs, I know that's just a lot of information there. And as you become more and more acquainted with meta programs, the important thing is recognizing that these are just learned processes, filters that you can change. Does anybody here have a meta program that you would like that is a driving meta program, and you would like to have more flexibility with it, so that you can turn that down in certain contexts when that's appropriate?
Michael, I have one that I use both sides of, and it
Okay.
seems to be very self-empowering.
Okay.
Most people say I'm procedures versus options. Options are goals, procedures are processes, and steps by steps. And I find if I develop meticulous procedures, it gives me more options.
Uh-huh.
And then there are times when I don't want to get buried in the procedures, so I just try to
Okay, so you got
maximize
good
my choices. I
flexibility.
go back and forth. So some of them, to me, are not disempowering.
Well, no meta program is disempowering in and of itself. It's where you use it.
Okay.
And the only disempowering is if it's a driver and you have no flexibility.
Stuck on one end. Or the
Yeah,
other.
so you always have to do procedures. You always have to have options. When I do the wealth building training, we're going to do our wealth building day on day 5 here. We're going to spend time on wealth building. And oftentimes people who can see opportunities, they can't seize opportunities because they can't prioritize. Because then they would be saying no to some options. They have to be options. Well, there comes a time when you see all these opportunities, and now it's time to seize an opportunity, to seize one thing and to go for it. You have to say no to some really great things. And if your options, and if options drives you, and you cannot now do a procedure, you'll just jump and jump and jump and jump and jump, and you just have all these great ideas, but never do one thing. So options is for brainstorming. Procedures is for getting something done. So those of you with the tidiness issue, or the others who have tidy issues, because they've taken care of theirs, might want to make that, meta program shift, that there's a time to do options and then there's a time to do procedure. And it's flexibility of consciousness that's really the key. Procedure. This is a meta program. It's a filter of how do I adapt myself as I move through the world? How do I adapt? As I move through, how do I do stuff? Do I do stuff step by step in a procedure? Do I need the procedure? What's step 1? What's step 2? What's step 3? I've probably been torturing some of you procedure people with the way I've been doing these exercises, because I tend to do it very options-oriented. And I'll write down the steps, and then sometimes I'll follow them, sometimes I won't. So I'll keep my options open. Where is he? So a procedure is, I move through so procedure people, they can follow guidelines and procedures, and they're excellent. Once a great procedure to get something done, they can follow it again and again, and they like it. It feels right. It feels familiar. And so they love that. Options people could invent a procedure, but getting them to follow it, kiss it goodbye. So those of us who are options, setting down to follow a procedure is going to be the opposite side, and giving yourself permission. Because what the dragon that will roar in the background will be, but I'll lose my options. And the fear and the apprehension of turning down great things. I often say that my choices these days is not between good and bad. It's not even between good and great. It's between great and excellent. So I have to say no to some great things. And I've got a lot of friends and associates who say, here's something. This would be a great thing. Let's go do this. And it is great. And I would just be all over the place if I went after everything. So I have to say no to some really great things.
So are you saying, in my example, are you saying that I'm more options? I do like procedures, but I'm more options because I'm not willing to just say, okay, I'm going to forget all this other stuff. I'm just going to do it this way.
Well, does that fit for you?
At first I thought I was thinking that it was procedure, because when I'm looking at what you're doing, I say, okay, what's the steps?
If I gave you a procedure for cleaning your house, would you do it? Jim would.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. Okay. Get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this. Within there, when I get to the one thing out of all these 25 other things, I might say, oh, but I want to do this piece a little differently. So that's not okay. That's getting the opposite.
So it sounds like there's some procedure, but also some mismatching.
like I don't want to do what you're.
Well, you're looking for the difference. You're sorting for all the distinctions and all the differences. The next person up.
Yeah, this is his last place.
Between those two, between procedures and options. But you say, like, be flexible between the two.
Right. Right. And as Richard mentioned, we can have the option of doing a procedure. We can have the procedure of now going options. So we can do a mixture of this. But what most of us do, most of us get stuck at one end or the other. Now, if another meta program comes in like matching or mismatching, and you're trying to follow a procedure, but then you're also mismatching, well, I don't throw that away. I don't know how to throw that away. I haven't made up that decision, and that there. And so you may be mismatching while you're trying to follow a procedure, so the procedure takes forever. Well, one thing would be, which is the meta program that is creating the difficulty or the stuckness, and it may be that matching mismatching.
So if that is it, would I just say I don't want to mismatch anymore, and I just have to bite the bullet?
Bite the bullet.
I mean, it's
Is that one decision?
I've got to change this.
Nice minute.
Maybe have a different frame that I bring in there, and
So that the procedure you may want to do when you know that here are books and here are things and it's in my way and I've made this decision is to say they're all the same. They're books and they just need to be distributed somewhere. So that the sameness, instead of looking for, well, I like that one and I don't throw that one away.
he's got me.
It's
Wait a minute. So I'm just trying to figure out. So what do you think? That frame there and just say, look, if I really want to get this done,
Exactly.
then I can't say I can't throw that one away.
Yeah, exactly. That in that context, in that job, sorting for sameness while you're doing the procedure of getting rid of the books, sorting for sameness. They're just books. I'm just going to get rid of them. So you may check, do I have permission just to do that sameness to get that procedure done?
Maybe the way I've created the procedure is that I have already sorted for ahead of time. I've already sorted for, what I would like to do is just take out the ones I want, and then the rest that are left are going to go. So that when I get to that, then they will go.
Okay.
That's, I don't know what I'm saying there, but...
So that may be the solution. So while we do something, recognizing the glasses we have on that affects it. So while each of these meta programs are sorted out separately, they do intermix and intertwine there in different ways. And recognizing them, having flexibility, and running that systems check, running that ecology check, so we can see, is it really working for me or not in this instance?
Because whenever we're talking about this, it's almost like I'm not getting a choice here. There's no room for, well, let me be kind of flexible to go this way.
Okay. Do you have permission in this context that once you make your choice of cleaning, that you have no choice but to do it this way and get it done?
No, that's probably why I'm not getting it done. But
Okay.
if I could be flexible in a good sense, like the other day, taking the table out of one room and then actually getting a lot done because I had a place to put stuff that I was going to work on. There's something that...
What does it feel like if you go
That's
inside
much better.
and say, I give myself permission to be choiceless?
Terrible. That's the worst thing to do to me.
The worst thing.
That's the worst. I mean,
For this
that's
behavior.
For this
For this activity.
Right. For this behavior,
Most
you're
cases,
choiceless.
that's it for me. I really need choices. I want choices.
Michael, what she's doing is future pacing each book, and this might be valuable to me sometime.
It's wrong. It really is wrong.
So you're not doing the detailing. You're not detailing that
I'm not
detail.
saying I'm not doing any detailing, but it's not at some time. I'm working on this. It's people come and throw that away.
Okay.
I mean, how dare?
So as an options person who's fairly global, those were my meta programs when I started. When I first decided I'm going to read one book at a time, or work on one project at a time. It felt like, I'm really taking choices away. And as I gave myself permission, I am choiceless. I have to read this one book or write and work on this one project at a time. At first I did it that way. I have to. I'm choiceless. I have to do this kind of thing for my own resourcefulness and effectiveness, so that it put me in that. And then later on, I changed it to I get to. I get to do it this way, and I'm quite willing to say no to all these other things because. And so, as a belief frame that I added to this, I know that that kind of concentration will be much more effective now and in the long run than if I'm all distracted.
I can also see, though, you've already said today that you read how many books in so much time. Maybe you don't go from book to book. I know people who read 3 books at a time, that kind of here and there. And the only reason I can see them doing that would be, because I don't know if I can do that really. The only reason I see them doing that is either that they get bored at this point, or they want some extra input about this topic within this other book, which could be helpful. So
yeah, it could be.
So it seems like you have to weigh how much this is helping me versus hindering me.
So another meta-program that we're hearing now is your decision meta-program. How do you make decisions? How involved, convoluted, or short and quick and succinct is your decision-making process?
If I had to give you a quick answer, I'd say it's probably longer than short. Okay. When I go in a store, this guy over here is like in and out, right? Okay. I'm there, I can just, which watch do I want? I can be in there for 10 minutes.
So decision, when you say yes, no, when you make a decision, how long does it take you to feel convinced? How many times do you need to go through it? What convinces you? Is it what you see or hear or feel? Are you immediately convinced, or you have to go through lots of criteria to get convinced? And so here's another meta-program, your decision-making meta-program. When you make a decision, there is a price to pay. You're cutting off the other choices. So how comfortable do you feel in cutting off choices and paying a price? Because if I say I'm going to read one book at a time, the price I'm going to pay is I can't just be stimulated and triggered by all the other good stuff that I see there that I'd like to. And so now I'm paying a price. And so am I willing to pay? So it brings up some of the frames about risk. Am I willing to risk losing out on that at this moment? So this is where all those meta programs start interfacing.
I can see where I've definitely gotten better at decision making, as far as maybe not in keeping throwing away, but I am very aware that in order to get anything done, unless you are able to focus on one area, NLP, you will get nothing.
I met a medical doctor, and he was in stress. And so he called me up and said, I just need some stress management. So he come in, I said, okay, what creates stress? And it turned out that going out to his mailbox was stressful. And I said, how could going out to your mailbox be stressful? He said, if you saw my living room. I said, well, what would it look like? He said, I've got all my front, all these letters and magazines and this and junk mail and that. And I said, and he said, I sort them out. First class, second class, third class, junk mail. And so he says, I just get so stressed with mail, and now it's just all over my living room, and I'm bringing it it's all over the couch. And I said, well, what in the world's going on here? She said, I don't know to open this. I don't know why these people are sending this stuff here. I told these people to stop this. And he said, then I start opening them, and then all the papers all over the place. And suddenly it dawned on me. I said, how did you used to do orthopedic surgery? And he said, well, I'd look at it. I'd take an x-ray. I'd take another x-ray. I'd get a second opinion from another doctor. I'd look at this. I'd talk to the patient. And so he started telling me the strategy. And his personal assistant helped him. And so I said, I think you're using the wrong strategy for opening the mail. And I said, so finally, he was telling me, I said, how did you finally make a decision? He said, well, it was a collaborative decision, and we finally decided. And I said, so there came a point when you said, do it. Open the knee, do the surgery. He said, yeah. And I said, how'd that feel? And he said, and his shoulders relaxed, and he just sat back, and he said, now I could do my skill. Well, I said, I'm going to do something with you. So I came over and on his shoulder, I touched him there. I said, I want to just anchor this. I'll tell you what that's about in a little bit. But that feels really good, doesn't it? Feel that good, because right now, what's going on in your mind? Is it something like, just do it? And he said, yeah. And I said, feel that. So we got that anchored. And then I said, now I want you to look at the mail. Feel this. To shorten up that strategy. Because his decision strategy was too convoluted for opening mail. And it was during the time when Nike was running their commercials, just do it. So I used that as a metaphor for him to just open it, make a decision, keep it, throw it away. And his comment was, it could be that simple. And I said, you can make it that simple if you want to.
Michael, his META program was 25, paralysis by analysis to the point of perfection. I sensed my colleague over there, this wonderful lady, wants to do it all perfectly too, and she's putting personality values on those books.
So, does that fit? Is there some perfectionism there?
Oh, I know I've had perfectionism, but I guess I wasn't focusing on that part. But I think what you said about strategy, to take the strategy over here, that I look at a place where I don't dilly-dally, I just I'm going to go.
So find the resource there
and
apply
that to the house.
Okay.
Feng Shui says if you have a cluttered house, you have a cluttered mind.
They have a cluttered house, they have a cluttered mind.
Number 50 on 51, Michael. Talk to me about that overly strong superego. So you've got the morality sort, you've got a weak superego, a strong superego, and then what is an overly strong superego?
On the continuum of conscientiousness, how conscientious are you? Do you think about other people's thoughts and feelings and maybe hurt? So at one end you'd be a sociopath, wouldn't care about anybody, no conscience, not conscientious about how we live our lives and the morals that we live by. And then some people are so overly conscious, they feel guilty if it's raining and someone wants a picnic. Give me a break. So they can feel guilty if they said something and somebody got their feelings hurt, like they are responsible. So it's really an occupational hazard of anybody who has high morals and a religious background. They can become so conscientious that now they can't live at peace with anything that goes wrong because somehow they can take responsibility for it. So the meta programs is a whole domain. We do 3-day training in our master prac on meta programs, and the meta program detective game was a game that we came up to play to learn meta programs, because you can see how important they are. There are perceptual filters, and oftentimes they are a problem when we misuse them or in some wrong context. And so having that awareness, and if you do find one that is a driver and it's driving you and you don't feel like you have flexibility, that would be one I would use this pattern on of changing meta programs. I'm willing to do a demo with that if somebody has one and you want to change a driving meta program.
Well, I don't know if this would be a good example, but when I get out into my shop and I'm doing my creative work with electronics or whatever, I can't be interrupted. If I get interrupted, I have a hard time getting back to it.
Okay. So when you say you can't get interrupted, when an interruption does occur, what happens?
You mean, what is the interruption, or what happens?
Yeah, when you get interrupted, what, phone? Somebody comes in?
Yeah, phone or something like that.
And it's like whatever your program was, it just went down?
Yeah, because I was flowing. I was in that now moment, and everything was flowing. It wasn't a pre-planned, step 1, step 2, step 3. I was flowing with this whole thing, and then all of a sudden the flow stopped.
Now this afternoon, the pattern we're going to do this afternoon, the Genius pattern, will help with that. Because the Genius pattern is how to handle interruptions effectively, and how to set some frames in your mind so that you choose which interruptions you will let interrupt you, and which ones you can just screen out. Now there is a meta program on here called Screening Non-Screening. How skilled are you at just screening out background noise? And a non-screener is like any little sound. Any little sight is like it grabs your attention, and it's hard to screen out that. People who are neurologically, people who are non-screeners, you don't screen things out, you will tend to have cold extremities in your body. Screeners tend not to be that way. They can screen it out. And neurologically, it makes sense in that if you're concentrating on something and you screened it out, then your nervous system is still engaged. But if you're not screening and you catch it, it's like your nervous system, the blood is sent to the larger muscle groups because it's almost a stress response. And so screening, non-screening. Would you say you're a screener or non-screener?
I'd say I'm a pretty good screener.
So you can screen.
Yes.
So that'll make the genius pattern even easier for you. People who are not screeners, sometimes you have to adjust that meta program to do the genius pattern really, really effectively, and give yourself permission to let things be screened out.
Michael, what about perfectionism? How do you deal with somebody who can really stop people?
The continuum of perfectionism is the continuum of how do you go after goals. So on that continuum, we got the skeptics who says, I'm not going after any goal. I'll just get disappointed, get disillusioned. They won't set goals. They won't play the game. I'm not doing New Year's resolutions. So they've been burned out. They've been hurt. They won't do it. When you move up into the level, there's people who will set goals and go after them. And in the middle, they'll do the best they can, leave it at that. So we call that optimizing. So I set this goal, do the best I can, leave it at that. Over at the other end will be, it's never good enough.
Well, they don't start.
So when they have this belief, that's not good enough. It could have been better. After they experience that a little bit of time, then before they set the goal, they're afraid of setting goals, so they'll procrastinate. So that's why perfectionism and procrastination are two sides of the same coin. Because if I never start, then I won't show myself how inadequate it is. So perfectionism doesn't mean flawlessness. It is a different kind of perspective. Psychologically, it is the perspective, it could have been better. Could have been better. And it doesn't take much to figure out how that got installed. We come home with a B. Well, how come you didn't get an A? We clean up the kitchen. Well, look at that dirt. And so what is always focused on is what wasn't right. And we weren't given a lot of validation. Look at what, you got a B. Good for you. Let's go out and let's bring in pizza tonight to celebrate that. And instead of celebration, the celebration can never occur. And so a perfectionist is one of the most miserable persons in the world because they don't do celebration, honoring, and acknowledging, and patting on the back. And so they don't have that sense of validation. It could have been better. Could have been better. I should have done that. And so that, as a frame, does a lot of discounting. And because we're discounting, then the things that are done well are not reinforced. Without reinforcement, then there's not growth and it becoming more robust. So the dynamic of perfectionism is really a very miserable place to be in terms of going after goals.
How do you change it?
Awareness is the first thing on this continuum. One of the most paradoxical things I say to a perfectionist is you'll get a whole bunch more done and have much more excellence at it if you just do the best you can and leave it at that. And of course, a perfectionist hears that through perfectionism, and it's like, you got to be kidding. That sounds terrible. Why would I do that? So getting them to step out of that. And this is where getting leverage with them. Well, the way you're doing it now, does it work? And helping them to see someone who just does the best they can and leave it at that and does lots of celebration and getting them a sense that'll take you so much further than that perfectionistic driving. And also helping a person to recognize that this lack of validation, this lack of acknowledgement and honoring, what does that feel like and how is that? And so in one sense, they have to do the most counterintuitive thing that they want to do. They have to lower their expectations. And they lower their expectations, and they'll have more excellence. But that's one of those other paradoxes.
Is that a meta program now, or is that?
I've got it as one of the meta programs there on that page.
Number 25.
25 on goal achievement, goal
Under choosing.
under choosing.
That'd be a good one for me.
So you may want to just, one way to change it is I give myself permission to do it wrong the first time so that I can learn and get better. I give myself permission to do the best I can, leave it at that. And just, it's really a reparenting and getting away from that, why didn't you have the A? Why didn't you do this? What's wrong with that? And the motivation of a parent doing that is obviously, trying to raise the standards and trying to help and trying to motivate, but it has a counter effect, really.
One of my driving meta programs is controlling and judging instead of perceiving and observing.
Okay.
But I think I'm already trying to shift away from that, and I think that's part of why I'm here.
Okay.
To learn how to perceive and then, understand what people give me better.
Okay. So the meta program, controller, perceiver, and this comes from Myers-Briggs personality types. That's one that was brought into the NLP meta programs, controller, perceiver. This is how we relate to the world. So how do I relate to the world? How do I relate to things or to people? Do I just observe and notice and witness, and I want to adapt myself to the world? I want to fit in and just adapt and perceive. It's a very Eastern kind of perception. More Western is, I'm going to make the world adapt to me. I'm going to get the world to adapt and to shape to what I want it to do. And so those two perceptions, perceiving, adapt. So the controllers, and it's really an unfortunate word, the people who do the adapting, they're the shakers and movers. They make things happen. When we're perceiving, we can enter in and just notice and observe and be a witness to it. We have that kind of detached scientific attitude and just observe, and so we're very gentle and very respectful of whatever the environment or the context is. As a coach, you would do both. As a therapist, you would do both. First of all, you come in and just observe and witness and non-judgmental attitude and awareness, and then at some point we offer things that will adapt so the person can get their outcome. What do you want? Here's how I'm going to interact with you so that you can get what you want. So once again, it's that dance between the two, and being in one or the other all the time is what can be harmful to us, really. I've got time to do a demonstration with someone if someone wants to change a meta program. So you have the sense of perfectionism. So the way you go after goals and do the words in your mind could have been better.